Hi, Sandites. Welcome to episode 7 of Sandite Chat. Today's topic is all about school safety, so it's a little bit more serious maybe than some of the ones we've covered in the past. Today with me, I have two of our superstar principals, Miss Noel from Clyde Boyd Middle School and Mr. Smith from the Freshman Academy on the campus of Charles Page High School. So welcome to Sandite Chat. Thank you both for being here. Topic today is a little bit heavy, but I know as we start each school year, and I know this is not the beginning of it, but certainly in the thralls of the first semester, parents are always concerned about just the safety of kids at school, and rightly so. So we're going to go through a few just questions that we've gotten. We're going to start with just talking about the importance of safety at school. I'm going to lead in, and then you two just kind of comment. We'll make this a conversation with us three. I think that's healthy. So we have a school safety committee. The bottom line is, the work of that committee is really about making sure we're doing everything possible to make our kids and our staff feel safe at school. We know that kids don't learn well unless they feel like they're in a secure environment, nor do our teachers teach well if they don't think they're in a secure environment. So that's the kind of the reason behind it. But Mr. Smith, you chair the district safety committee. Could you share what that is, what it's about? Okay. How are the members picked, or how do we do that?
Okay, this district safety committee is composed of students, teachers. We have counselors. A large number of our counselors are on that. Some administrators, parent participation in it as well. Basically, what we want is to get input from all areas. And so by having those different groups, those different sets of people on there, we're able to get some input that helps us, because we value their input. We want them to feel safe, like you said earlier, and to get the input from teachers. They're around these students and around the campuses all the time. They see stuff that they can bring to us that's going to help us when we determine what types of things we need to do to keep them safe and our students safe.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about systematic training.
Okay.
And how you have acquired the skill set and the expertise that you've acquired to take on that large role.
Okay.
And we understand it is a large role. So let's talk about the training we've encountered.
Okay. And I'm thankful that I'm in a district that values that, because I'm able to go to some different conferences where basically we're looking at best practices throughout the country. And you learn some stuff that other schools have gone through that you can take back to your school and share. And so when we talk about like threats and all of that type of stuff, those things are all mentioned in these conferences, and you get the insight of people that have gone through it, that they learned what they did good, what they did bad, and then you take from that and you take it to your site or to your district, and you say, hey, this is some things we can do. Stuff as simple as looking at locking your doors,
right?
Things like that, where you take for granted that until you look at the history behind certain events, and you're like, hey, if your doors would have been locked, that wouldn't have happened. Something as simple as that. But then you look into different things that's going on in the country at the time, and you can kind of stay ahead of it. And
right.
So that's one of the benefits that we get. And so we meet with the committee every 4 to 6 weeks, and we're talking about best practices. We're talking about things that's going on in our community, but things that's going on in the country in general. And we talk about, hey, how can we get this? How can we make it better
right.
here in our location?
I think the takeaway is we don't craft a safety plan just because we think it's a good idea.
Exactly.
Those, I say research-based, but they're really about actual instances where other people, unfortunately, have gleaned experience that allow us to know what are the best practices that make our kids safe. And so that's helpful. And thank you for taking the time to, every year, it's not a one and done. It's every year, it's a continuation of professional development so that we know the best practices that we need to be using.
Absolutely.
So at the beginning of the year, Angela, we had several reasons that we had to communicate to parents. I feel like it's settled down, knock on some wood somewhere, but right now. And that's always tricky because middle school's kind of a different cat anyway. Kids are, growing, going through stages that we all kind of scratch our heads and go, what in the world? But you dealt with a few of those in the fall.
Yes,
so far.
we did.
So I want you to talk through what happens when you catch wind of a potential threat.
So the first thing I do is assess the threat along with our law enforcement. So our school resource officer, I will go to him and say, okay, this is the situation. Is this something that we need urgency action on? What do we need to do to protect the students? And so immediately I have his feedback on that for student safety. And then I call Ms. Durkee, of course, and then we kind of make a decision based on the threat, the level of threat. Is there a plan? Was it towards a specific student? Is it towards the whole school? Is it specific? Is there a need to immediately take action as far as going and searching a student? So all the things, it just depends on what the situation is. But each situation is taken very seriously. So it could be something as simple as something that you might run across that may not seem like a big deal to you, but when you think that you have 1,100 students, their safety is of the utmost importance. So it's going to be taken seriously. And so thankfully we have a fantastic officer who is very, very detail oriented, kind of making sure we're looking at everything. And with him, we start to assess the situation.
So that's an important point. And we don't come up with these plans without research, without training, but we also have a great relationship with the Sand Springs Police Department. So we have 3. Yours is Jonathan Noah at the high school. Will Parman is located there, and then Cody Ziegler stations at Page Academy, but really does roam. And then we have an additional safety person, Jeremy Good, who does kind of rotates around the elementaries. And of course, everyone has the versatility to go if there's ever a need. So that relationship with our police department is super important. I'm just going to give you a scenario. I'm going to throw something out, and then you kind of take us through how you think about next steps. So let's say a student comes and says, Miss Noel, there is something on the bathroom wall that says somebody's going to shoot up the school.
Right.
And you don't have all the details. What's your next step?
My next step would be to call our resource officer and have him come look at it with us. And then we honestly start watching cameras. Yeah. We start looking to see who's went in this bathroom, how long they spent in there. We do regularly check the bathrooms so we can say, this wasn't here yesterday at this time. It's on a checklist. It's on a custodial checklist. So it wasn't here at this time. So who went in the bathroom between now and here? Do they have a pink marker or whatever it's written in? So we will go and check students' things and see. Typically, it's not just written. We've looked at handwriting. We've done it all. You become investigators. Yeah. Like you want to check to see where this actually came from. That's one of the worst ones because it is sometimes so vague, depending on how specific it is. But if they say they're going to shoot up the school, we start pulling those kids and questioning them. Was this in the bathroom when you went in there? Did you see this? Did you see anyone else in the bathroom? Did you see anyone with a marker or a pen or pencil, whatever? So it really just, you turn into investigators, but we immediately will start looking at, do we need to search these lockers? Do we need to, because let's say there's 12 kids that went in there in the time period that we think it went. We're going to immediately start searching those places just because it could, if it was written on there, it could be something that escalates really quickly. So my first thought is that I need the police officer to help me decide what our next steps are, if we need to search children, if we need to start interviewing kids, just where we go from there. And it also becomes one of those things, if it's super vague and we find out that a student wrote it that was just upset about something, it kind of just depends on, you got to take each set. Right. There's no one size fits all. I've never had one threat that's the same as another. Right. So each one of them, sometimes, a social media threat, well, if it comes from their specific account, it's really easy to narrow that down. Like, this child did this, this is what we need to look for. So we start taking, and every single one of them, like I said, is taken super seriously. But we immediately, let's say there's a social media one coming from a student's account, Snapchat. We send police officers to the home. Like, we immediately check the home for weapons. We do. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that.
Let's pause there, because occasionally, JJ, you get one that happens at night.
Right.
After school, 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
sometimes we've experienced a phone call from the resource officer saying, "Hey, Mr. Smith, I just got a tip. Here's what happened." And sometimes we can nail it down pretty quick.
Right. And when you can't, you're going to find me at my office at 2:00 in the morning, looking
Exactly.
at Infinite Campus and getting information on where these students live, who their parents are, how can we contact them. If we get that information, as soon as we get it, we're going to make a move,
Right.
And we have to,
Absolutely.
because we have
never
a
make
lot
it in
of
a bubble.
Absolutely,
There's
we have
a lot of people that go into it.
people that's going to be moving right now to make something happen, because we have to protect our students, our staff. We're not going to send them into a situation where there is a threat that we know of,
Right.
Until we check it out. And
Right.
so that's going to be immediate. One of the things that help us too is you have to build those relationships, because if you've got those positive relationships, these kids, they're with each other
They're
all
gonna
the
tell you.
time.
They come tell us.
And if we want them to feel comfortable with coming to us and giving us information.
We're going to hit that nugget really hard, because that's probably the most important key of keeping your site safe.
Absolutely.
And we're going to hit that hard. And people kind of, when I say that to folks, sometimes people go, "Really?" But it's the truth,
It's the
because
truth.
it's the tips that help you understand and be the detective to figure those things out. One of I'm going to plug our Coffee with the Cabinet. It happens the last Monday of every month. We've been to Pratt, we've been to Garfield. The 18th of November, we'll be at Angus. Any parent can come, and we talk through things. One of the things that was mentioned at Pratt is just kind of the question about communication. I think if I'm at home and I'm mom, and I hear something from another mom, or there's a rumor, I can get myself worked up pretty quickly about is my child safe? And so let's talk through the communication schematic, because it is a balance between, and we always talk when communication goes out. Every administrator's on the phone to me, and Lisa is sitting in the background over here doing what she does. But they're on the phone to us, and we're talking through the when, the how, and the what. I say those three things because the what's really important.
Right.
Because the last thing we want to do is put out information that we're not sure about.
Absolutely.
If I ask any administrator in any point where you think that kids might be safe, what is the first thing you're going to do?
We're at any point where there might be safe.
You make sure the kids are safe.
Yeah, there's no
That's
mark.
the first
There's no mind.
Yeah.
So I guess in the relationship to the communication, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I know your answer.
Yeah.
You make sure that the site's secure.
Right.
Sometimes in the scope and sequence of what we do, where there is a threat or some sort of safety something, communication isn't always the first thing that we do to parents, because we need to make sure kids are safe.
Right.
So it's tricky. The communication part is tricky. I always say it's really hard to beat social media, because the kids have phones and they're texting their parents sometimes, and so that information is out. Angela, do you have?
Yes. So sometimes this is one area I'm like, okay, I've dealt with this quite a bit. So for one, I'm not on these kiddos' Snapchat. I'm not friends with them on social media. So I do count on the relationships in the building. Students. Almost every tip I've ever been given has been a student comes and confides and tells us, "Hey, we found this, we saw this is on so-and-so's Snapchat, this is on their story, this is on their Instagram, whatever." But so we do rely on the relationship with kiddos, and that's something that we need parents' help with too. But sometimes misinformation or not having the full story can be worse than no information.
Right.
So if we send out something super vague because that's all we know, or it's not a valid threat and we would consider it a very low threat, like there's, like the bathroom situation, that could be considered very low unless we find something else that corroborates that threat. And so at a very low threat, we could be possibly sending messages to parents so much that they start to feel unsafe because they're thinking, oh, if this is a big enough deal, they're sending it to us.
Right.
It makes you think it's a big deal. But sometimes it doesn't rise to that occasion. And when we do send out messaging, it's more usually about the fact that we want you to know we've taken care of it, but that students are going to talk. Middle school, they are going to talk. They are going to spread rumors. I've heard, the rumor mill gets back and it is nowhere near what started.
Right.
Rumors start all the time talking about school safety. They're like, oh, you guys have a fight every week. We don't.
Nope.
We do not have a fight every week. Thank goodness, knock on all the wood. But the kids, they start rumors.
Absolutely.
And so for us, it's a matter of when we're investigating, is this something that rises to the occasion that we should let a parent know? And a lot of times we overshare, over communicate in times where it probably wouldn't have needed to be, but we were more worried about students talking about it than anything else.
And I think too, we have to take into consideration that we are working with the police on these matters.
Exactly.
And so sometimes those things reach a level of a criminal investigation and there's only so much stuff that you can share.
Right.
And so we have to be certain that what we put out there is not going to impede the investigation.
Correct.
And so we have to be aware of those.
Absolutely.
We have to be really, really cautious with some of that. But we're going to tell you things that we're doing to keep your kids safe. We're going to tell you the type of threat. We're going to tell you when it happened.
Right.
But the other stuff, it
The
may come
intricate
later.
details
Yeah,
of it,
it
you
may
can't
come
really
later.
share.
Exactly.
So some of the experiences we had when school started, the first few weeks of school, maybe month and a half, were really about people getting upset and us needing to dispel the rumor mill.
Well, it was TikTok. So there was a trend on TikTok where there was this thing that was going around that they were, it was basically that they were putting, actually it was like initials of schools. It wasn't even, and it didn't even originate in Oklahoma. It was from somewhere else. And so these kiddos were seeing it and they saw something that might have said CB or CPHS or something like that. And then it could have been a completely different school, but it was basically a rumor mill, something that started, and it was a trend on TikTok, and it became all these kiddos are, it's getting very, they're talking about it all the time.
Right.
And it had nothing to do with us. It had nothing to do with our school. It didn't. So, but we still wanted to put out the message to parents that, hey, we've not received anything. No, this has not been anything here. These are all things that are far away. But like ours in conjunction happened to be the day that the internet and phones went out.
That's true.
So there's
you had a couple.
Oh man. So that was a few days where parents are just very.
There was one, you said telephone game with the rumor mill thing, where a student overheard something he thought he heard.
Yeah.
So it took
and
a
it
minute.
was not what he heard at
Those
all.
rumors went out, and then we're getting calls, and sometimes it gets to me, and I have to call one of you and say, "Okay, what just happened?"
Right.
Because it's really kind of a non-issue.
Yeah.
But at that element, Lisa and I are conspiring about, okay, how do we message it?
Right.
How do we get it out? And who do we get it out to? Because if it's specific to Clyde Boyd or Pratt, we really want to narrow it to that school site, because then we're not amping up everyone.
We don't want to over worry people for no reason. But I feel like if ever we think anything is even
remotely,
even could potentially, we are letting parents
And
know.
I've heard you mention, Ms. Sturkey, sometimes it's best to get out in front of it.
Oh, absolutely.
And so that could be, that's one of those situations, because it can get wild.
Way crazy. And so we try to get in front of it. You still get those folks that will still come get their child.
Absolutely.
Because I'm nervous about it. And that's fine.
That's fine.
For people to do that. But again, getting out in front of it so that I think just parents knowing that we know about it.
Right.
There's some semblance of relief about, okay, they know.
Yeah.
And then, you hope you find those relationships with parents too, that you've built the trust that they know Mr. Smith is going to take care of it.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to have to worry as much. But, we kind of hone in on threats regarding weapons and such. Weapons could consist of a lot of things, not just a gun or whatever. But we forget other unsafe things that we also have to communicate out. I back before you were principal at Clyde Boyd Middle School, we had a gas leak, for instance. Well, that's pretty bad. And so we need to get people away from those situations. So I don't know if you, JJ, want to elaborate on, there are other things besides just an immediate threat that could cause an unsafe environment.
Absolutely. When you mention school safety, there's a lot that we go through, a lot of stuff that we address that's school safety, whether that's on buses, whether that's, we just had that COVID stuff, all that
Bullying,
stuff, bullying, all that stuff falls under school safety. And so that's something that we are dealing with constantly.
Absolutely.
And that's part of our job. I mean, that's what we do. We're here to keep our students safe regardless of what the circumstance. And I think people think of school safety and immediately, because what you see on most national media and through news is all you ever see really are school shootings and stuff like that.
Right.
But there's more to it.
Right.
And so we have to take all of that in consideration, whether that's drills that you have to go through, all of those types of things we do to prepare our students to be as safe as they can while they're there.
Right. Locked exterior doors, locked classroom doors have become our life. I remember the first year I put out the edict, hey, all teachers keep your doors locked. And at first it seemed like a kind of a hassle. What? Kids are leaving in and out. Why do I have to do it? It's interesting. We just had our Oklahoma School Security Institute. Risk
vulnerability
Thank you.
assessments.
The vulnerability, I can say that word, assessment for our buildings, our facilities. One of the things I noticed, we haven't had time yet. We just got them back couple of days ago to really pick through them. But one of the things I did notice is make sure those classroom doors are locked, which I sent out. We talked about it in leadership. Use that as your little nugget that this isn't just coming from the leadership team at Sand Springs. This is about best practices that we've learned over time. So that's good. But you're right. There's so many things that we have to think about in regard to safety.
Tornadoes, weather, all of it.
Every bit of it.
We were in the middle of what we thought might be bad weather going home from school. What day was that? This week. The week has gone slow and then fast too, all at the same time. But we worried about a tornado when it was release time for the elementaries. And I tried really hard not to, get all upset and borrow trouble. My mom used to say, don't borrow trouble. But it ended up not being a thing. But when that was going on and we thought there might be, I was on the phone to Eric Anderson, our transportation department. Okay, we got this. We were sending our group me out. Hey, you guys, we got to be prepared for what could happen and what our plan is. So, JJ,
just like at our sites, when that was going on, I sent something to our staff at Charles Page Freshman Academy and the high school saying, hey, you have your emergency booklets. Make sure that you've noticed our tornado procedures and all that, just in case, because you have to be ready for anything that happens.
Absolutely.
And we practice that. This is stuff that we do. It's part of our safety procedures.
Absolutely.
And so I hope parents understand that we're doing everything we can to keep their kids safe and our staff safe at all times.
Well, and I think we practice it enough. I'm not going to say we never panic. But for the most part, I've experienced our admin team taking on that role of I've got the cool head and I've got to think through it. Sometimes I think when people panic, they want to, for instance, in a storm scenario, I just want to come get my kid. I want them with me when it could be specifically in sites that have the safe rooms, more safer for them to stay there. Or even in our concrete block building at Charles Page High School is pretty darn safe.
I got that question. So I had parents calling, well, Ms. Starkey, call school early. And I said, well, I want you to think that through. These children going home to where their home is maybe less safe than the building that we're in. So why would we leave early whenever we have a very safe place for them to be?
Absolutely.
You're not saying the roads are going to get treacherous. You're saying the potential of a tornado hitting a building. Well, if it hits a house, it's going to do a lot more damage than it is if it hits one of their building is not going anywhere.
Absolutely. So exactly.
So I personally, my own child was at the high school, and I was like, oh, I hope they just stay there. If anything, you're going to say, let's delay the bus route and keep them in the building until it's safe to move on. And after I explained that, after a few parent phone calls, they were like, oh, that makes sense. Other places might have called early, and I'm like, it would not make any sense for her to do that in this situation. For one, kids could be home alone, which is another different, that's a whole other safety thing. And it wasn't part of the plan. So our plan is that we're going to keep them the safe as they can be.
Place. Especially if the tornado whistle is if the tornado whistle's going, we're keeping the babies in.
Yes.
Come on in, Mom. But, they need to stay.
Yes.
But Jamie Conrad walked in my office that day and said, after school programs. And for a minute, because in a snow scenario, we would close after school programming.
Because it'd still be
just keep getting
slick.
worse.
Yes.
But in a tornado weather instance like that, it passes.
Right.
So you hunker down. Anyway, all those
passes, and we have plans.
Right, exactly.
And I feel safer in that building than in my house.
Right.
I feel like it's
But JJ, you make a good point. Like we have a plan for a purpose, and we don't reveal our plans out to public either.
Right.
There's a reason for that.
Absolutely.
What is it, JJ?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the main reason is we don't want people interfering with that plan.
Right, exactly.
And then with that, we've got to, again, it goes back to safety and worrying about our students being safe. We don't want to bring outside influences that could be a hazard to our students into that plan, because it could cause some confusion and could cause some delay and cause some bad things.
That wears heavy on my heart, because the most important thing for me is our kids to get home safe.
Yeah.
Period. End of story. And I never, knock on wood again, want to be in a place where I'm having to really regret something that we didn't do right. And so, golly, I hope parents hear us above all say that we take that so seriously.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about how parents can help. How can parents help? How can students help? Really with a whole gamut of just kind of this idea of safety, ideas.
If their child reports something to them, don't assume that we know. Right. Because that's the biggest thing we do here. Well, you guys didn't do anything. Well, if you don't tell us, you can't be sure that we knew. So even if you have a friend that says, oh, yeah, I reported that, you report it yourself. So if your child says something, say something to us. If they see something in a hallway, if they don't assume that it's something that we're already aware of, don't assume that it's not a big enough deal to tell us, because everything is important and everything could be a part of a bigger story. Or, when we talk about bullying and things like that, I want to know, because I want to know that something was done and I want to know that we're handling everything. So their best bet is to talk to your children.
Absolutely.
If they tell you something they won't tell us, then you tell us. If they're not comfortable coming forward, you come forward. Make sure that we get that information so that we can do what we need to do.
I'm hoping I think we do, for the most part, work on building relationships so kids are willing to tell. The other thing I would say is we've worked through, I combined years of experience. We had added up, but there's a lot sitting just right here.
Right.
Making sure kids know when they report, we keep that as confidential as we can, because I know harboring that feeling of making a friend mad or worrying about how people are going to perceive me as being a tattletale or whatever. Retaliation is a big one, that we really work hard to keep those reports confidential so that, because we want kids to trust us and we want them to know that when they report, we're not going to just brush it to the side, we're actually going to address it.
Yeah, we have parents use the Stopit app.
Right.
Which is great. And we have things reported. At least once weekly we'll have a report and Stopit. And typically it's just the kiddo doesn't want anybody to know that they're telling, but we've been able to give consequences for finding things on camera and things like that, because we wouldn't have known. There are a lot more kids. We are outnumbered. There are a lot more kids than there are us, and we're not privy to all the little conversations they're having, all the little interactions during a day. I don't know how many times I've got that. Well, you guys didn't see that. I only have 2 eyes, and there's a lot of kids, and I'm watching and we're scanning and we're trying to be vigilant, but we can't see everything. Correct. And so we need parents to help us step forward, tell us what's going on. Just send us an email, give us a call, send a pigeon, whatever. Just tell us. Just tell us.
And we always say build positive relationships with our students. We want positive relationships with our parents as well, because they have input too, and we value that. This is not a situation where we don't want them to tell us. We want to.
We want every bit of information we can receive.
I think my big takeaway from the Pratt Coffee with the Cabinet is we had 10 parents that came, and I hope and I think they saw us as human.
Right.
That we're really earnestly trying hard to figure things out, We want collaboration, but we are human. We're real people that really care, that really try to problem solve. And so that was an epiphany that I had, and I really love that. So I hope more people start attending that.
Well, as a parent, my kids have come through the district, which yours did and yours did too, right?
For sure.
I would have my own student in my building with me, and I felt like our safety plans were my own children are in the building. So that's the high risk you can get, right? Is your own child, because you would lay down your life to protect your child.
Right.
I was comfortable with the decisions that we made as a district because we always put kids first, that I never had to worry. When there were the threats at Page or at Charles Page with my kiddos there. Right. My kiddos were at the middle school when I had a kiddo at the middle school with the gas leak. Like, I never worried that my kid's safety wasn't put first. And so just being a parent, I think it just speaks volumes when people would call and say, oh, are you guys going to do this? Are you going to do that? And I'd say, my kid is in a classroom 3 doors down the hall. If I thought for 1 minute they weren't safe, believe me, they're out, and so are your kids, and we're going to see if we can all fit in my car. We're getting out of here. Everybody's going to get out. But I've always felt safe. I've always felt like my kid, and like I said, I have a kiddo at the high school right now. I've never felt one time through any of it that they would not be safe.
That's a great testament, because I feel the same way.
Absolutely, me too.
I had my kids in different elementaries too, by the way, and I still felt like that was the case then. So thank you guys. The football team's playing at Sapulpa tonight. Yeah. Apparently there's going to be some rain. Not sure how that's going to work out, but I would encourage all Sandites, if you can brave it, to get out and cheer for the Sandites tonight at Sapulpa. Anything else you want to add before we say goodbye to our folks?
No, I'm just appreciative.
Yeah, me too. That's what I was going to say. We appreciate the support from our community. We hope you understand that we're going to do our very best to keep your child safe, our staff safe. That's our goal.
Perfect.
And so thank you.
Couldn't have been said any better. Sandites, thank you for watching. We'll catch you next time.